Hi everyone, my name is Jean and I'd like to personally welcome you to Culture Colosseum, the new and diverse channel focused on shifting the way you know and see the world. Today, on Untold, we're going to peer into the life of a man known for his eccentricity and outrageous style and personality. We're going to be heading back to the later 19th century, beginning traveling through France and Wales to meet one of history's most astonishing people, Henry Cyril Paget. We're joined today by fellow channel member Hunter. Hi, Hunter.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for asking.
So do you like history?
This usually isn't the area I focused on, but from what you've told me about this guy, he seems like quite the character, so...
Yeah, the last video we did on this was, it took place in 1260, so we're going to be hopping all over time. Before we begin, I'm hoping you all join us on our journey through history in the Untold series. So don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Creator Source Studio and at Culture Colosseum to get the first look on new and exciting videos and content that's going to be coming out. It's going to be posted there first, so join us. Okay, let's jump into history. In order to understand who this guy is, we have to understand a bit about England during the 1880s. So, Hunter, do you know anything about England during this time?
Not really. If you'd asked me about the 1400s, I might be able to give you something, but the more modern you get, the less I know, to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely find the 1400s England to be extremely fascinating. But when I read about this guy, I was like, I don't care if it's more modern. It's fascinating. But so during this time, it was the late Victorian era. You get to see a lot of political struggle. You have the Irish nationalist groups rising, political turmoil in the Liberal Party of England. There's struggles with preoccupied regions, especially in Africa, which, I mean, it's about time. And there's also economic stagnation and struggle. So they're going through the ringer in England. So this man's family was beyond wealthy. So putting that into context, there's this country that's struggling with economic stagnation and political turmoil, but this man's not even in the realm. He's not seeing any of this. It's kind of like when you ask a rich guy, well, how much do you think milk is? And he'd be like, I don't care. We also have to understand a bit of male expectation of the era. So here's an image of men wearing their suits. Men were very expected to be educated and well dressed. They wore full suits almost all the time, and they were expected to be serious and regal. A lot of people, historians especially, have noted that this is the mark of where toxic masculinity as a modern concept really began to come into play. You see a decline in understandings of spirituality, ideology, and honesty. That becomes less valued, and instead men are more valued for their strength and seriousness. Masculinity begins to be associated with athletics, physical dominance, rationality, and emotionlessness. Boys are starting to be told not to cry. They're starting to be told, like, don't show your emotions unless it's anger, things like that. So there's some origins of that here. But Henry doesn't show any of that, and that's why he's so interesting in context of this time period. So who is he? He was extraordinary, bold, unique, feminine, wealthy, iconic. Henry Cyril Paget is the 5th Marquis of Anglesey, and he was born in June 16th in 1875 in Paris, France, to the most lavish and aristocratic family of the time. His family is very militaristic. His mother was a member of a military family. Her name is Blanche Mary Boyd, and although she was from a very respected family and married to a serious military man also named Henry Paget, who was the Earl of Uxbridge and the 4th Marquis of Anglesey, she was known to travel the world cheating on him, and at the time where it was believed Henry was conceived, she was in France associating with an actor named Benoit Constant Coquelin. Adventures. He was believed to be a bastard and kind of treated as a black sheep by his father and the rest of his family. So when he was 2 years old, his mother died and he was sent to live with Mr. Coquelin in Paris. And so that's where he started his upbringing. But because he was from such a wealthy family and he was the only heir, currently to the fourth Marquise, he received extraordinary wealth from a young age. He was left about 535,000 euros, which today would be 60 million euros, which to US dollars would be a little over $68 million. So as he grew older, he became known for his lavish nature. He was obsessed with anything that was fancy and good, and he loved photography, especially taking photos of himself. Now, question for you, Hunter. What do you think his favorite hobby was?
Well, what you told me, I'd say either animal husbandry or art or acting.
That's a great guess. Yeah.
He clearly did not take after the military traditions of his mother's family.
No, he didn't. He loved going into jewelry stores and just being like, I'll take everything. And he would buy out entire jewelry stores. So there was that. And also the theater. Like you said, he was obsessed with acting and being on stage. And we'll learn a little bit more about his adventures on stage shortly. But yeah, you're right. He loved being around his pets, buying things, and acting. So when in January of 1898, he married a woman named Lillian Chetwynd. Not gonna pronounce her name right. I'm sorry, it's Welsh. And surprise, surprise, she was his cousin. So, you know.
Well, he was a Marquise.
Yes. So she hoped that by their wedding, the whole family was like, "Oh, he'll settle down. He'll calm down. He'll stop his lavish spending. He'll, be a real man of the time." But then 2 years later, she petitioned for divorce because he didn't stop and he was spending so insanely that she was worried that he would drive them into poverty. He briefly did have a stint in the military. He served as a lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Welsh Army, but that didn't last very long at all. He also, as you said earlier, was very into the arts. He was a talented painter. He knew Russian, French, and Welsh. And at one point, he even adopted a child, but she was returned to her birth parents because he was deemed an unfit parent. And then to get into his stint with acting, he actually turned his family's chapel, which was 150 seat church, into a theater, and then hired a theater company to put on performances for the people for free, which he would always come out during the performances and perform something called a butterfly dance, which was based on Miss Louis Fuller's serpentine dancing. She was a famous dancer who would go and do this like really flowy dance with ribbons and things like that. He would come out dressed entirely in jewels and flowing silks, and he would do this dance that he called the butterfly dance. Yeah, so at the theater company that he hired, he actually got to tour through Britain and Europe for over 3 years. He went around with them, and they were on this great tour where he danced and they performed, and it was this insane show that went around. And he was so obsessed with the costumes. That was his favorite part of the performances. And his most expensive noted costume was, at the time, it was 10,000 euros, which would translate to 11,000 US dollars. In modern day, it would be 1,000,000 euros, so about like 1,100,000 US dollars.
What, was it made with gold silk?
It was
gold
covered
threads?
It was covered in jewels, and he had like a massive tiara crown that he wore with it, and like he would line things, he would use golden thread for things. So
I was joking when I said gold thread, but wow.
Yeah. He would have gold thread trousers and underwear and costumes. So you're right on the nose there. So you can see he's pretty extravagant. Can you guess which of the following items he did not have? A.
Bring it on.
A flock of poodles that he would dye pink. B. A car that converted its exhaust fumes into a rose-scented perfume. C. A ping-pong jacket made entirely of emeralds. Or D. A pink meditation room filled with diamond-studded mirrors.
Wow, this guy was not subtle at all, was he? Well, let's see. He seems pompous enough that he would want the meditation room and the poodles. And from what you told me about how he dressed, I wouldn't be surprised about the ping pong thing either. So I guess I'll go with the car making exhaust that smelled like roses.
That is a good guess. However, it is wrong. He had an obsession with having a lot of different cars, and he had one who was his favorite that had rose scented perfume, and he would speed around in it and accumulated like $500 worth of speeding tickets because he just loved to have the smell of perfume in the air. He didn't have a meditation room that was pink and diamond studded mirrors that I know of. I don't think he was inwardly spiritual enough to meditate. But that's a good guess because who the heck has a car that has perfume? He spent a lot of money, and in 1904, he went bankrupt after only 5 or 6 years of having his fortune. 5 or 6 years, and he spent like so much money, like 60 million euros, $60 million pretty much of money he spent. And he actually accumulated about the same in debt. So in 5 to 6 years, he spent all that money and then got in debt with all that money. So he was really buying a lot. And that's when you can see the silk suits and fur coats and things like that. They went to sell his estate. It took one full day to sell his collection of dogs, which were poodles that he dyed pink and border collies. And then another full day just to sell his silk suits and fur coats. He had 900 of them.
Holy crud.
Yeah, could you
I
imagine
mean,
going to that auction?
I'm wondering how much silk suits would have cost back then, because that must have been an insane amount.
Yeah, you can
Also,
really see where his money went.
that those fur coats must have been real fur, so those must have been even more insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a lot of cash.
I'm thinking, like, how many of those did he go and buy, and how many did he just customize, have custom made for him? Despite all his spending on himself, he was also known for being a very generous man, and all of his tenants and servants were paid extremely well. They actually liked him. So when they were interviewed after his death, people said, despite his oddness, he seemed like a very selfish but lonely man who genuinely wanted people to have a good time, and that's why he was so flamboyant. Was he like wanted people to just have fun while they could? So people who knew him and worked for him praised his name. His family did not, because after 1904, after he fell into bankruptcy, his family said, "Okay, we can't do this with you anymore," and they sent him back to Paris, uh, where he was given an allowance of about $3,000 a month, which I think would, I mean, modern day $3,000 a month. So I don't know how much that was back then, but it was still a lot of money for him.
That
Um,
would put him about the average income of the U.S. at this point, roughly.
but he was like, I'm in poverty. I can't buy my fur coats and gold lined underwear. On March 14th, 1905, he passed away. That was 1 year after, bankrupting his entire family. And he passed away of pneumonia. He was only 29 years old. And his estranged wife came to his bedside when he was dying, and so did the sister of his believed father, Benoit Constant. She's not named in any documents, which I think is kind of shady, but apparently he was good friends with her. So at the time of his death, he had stated that he believed his life was wasted. And he said in an interview about a couple months before he died, they said, "Where do you think the money went?" He goes, "I just don't know. I'm not sure how I ran through that fortune so fast." But I think we can see. I think we know. It's a little sad. Nobody was recorded as going to his funeral. And his title of the fifth Marquis went to his cousin, Charles Henry Alexander Paget. His family destroyed all of Henry's stuff. All his letters, diaries, and papers were burnt and destroyed. So we really don't know much about him besides his recorded spending habits. I mean, you have this man who was so lavish, who did all these things, who would give money to his employees if they needed it, who didn't care if he lost $2 million worth of jewels. And nobody came to his funeral and they destroyed all his thoughts. Like, if we had that today, we would have a glimpse into this man's life. And he's been studied by historians. A lot of people have looked into him, questioning his sexuality. So, Iwan Block is a sexologist and historian who analyzed Paget while studying 20th century sexuality. And he was kind of using Paget as this symbol and icon. So was Mark Rees, who is an artist. He's drawn a lot of his inspiration from Lord Paget as well, and kind of heralds him as this gay historical icon. And throughout many articles that you'll see, they've dubbed him history's most aristocratic, notorious homosexual, but there's no solid evidence of this. Since we don't have his thoughts, since we don't have his journals and diary, we can't say that for sure. But he certainly is an interesting figure. So, what do you think about Mr. Paget?
Well, to be completely honest, I'm surprised he ever got the title of Marquise. If he was suspected of being a bastard, well, one, I'm surprised his mother did not get, divorced and kicked out. But the fact that he was treated so well, even up to the point where he was basically disgraced for most of his life, says something about his father and his father's family, that at the very least they're willing to give him a chance. So I will give him credit there. But I think he himself had a lot of issues that probably came along the lines of abandonment issues from his father, since he got, pretty much banished from his family home and sent to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he acted out and was probably dealing with depression or anxiety for a lot of his life. And that manifested in pretty weird ways, because you can't just say, oh, he was a flamboyant gay guy, that's why he was like this. Like, I've met flamboyant gay guys. They are not like that. They are in much better control of themselves than that.
Right. That's
so
why I
think he had a lot of issues. But...
Oh, yeah, no, I would say, like, that's just why it's not fair. I think unless he had explicitly written about that, which we don't know, it's not really fair for historians to try and pin that on him just to have somebody from that era. Now, you know the wildly insane story of Henry Cyril Paget. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed, and comment down below telling me what weird or underrated story you want to hear next. And go to our Instagram to comment on what crazy or silly thing you would buy if you were insanely rich. Because, I mean, an army of dogs isn't a bad choice. Subscribe for more content like this. And once again, I'm Jean, this is Hunter, and welcome to Culture Colosseum.